Welcome to Mount Sinai Future You, a show highlighting innovation and research right here at Mount Sinai that are changing patients' lives. This is our last and final episode. According to the American Cancer Society, 20% of people who die from lung cancer in this country every year have never smoked a cigarette or other tobacco. The same was true for Quintano Downs, a former Marine, an avid runner, someone who participated in many different types of sports. But following special targeted therapy for his stage 4 non-smoking lung cancer, he was able to return to an active lifestyle.
I never once sort of acknowledged a cancer diagnosis. I was just sick and I was going to get better. Stage 4 non-smoking lung cancer, and obviously there's some stage 5, so it was a shock to all of us. Me personally, I was sick and I was going to get better. You know, Marine Corps is key to some of the things that I do. It's a challenge, and once one challenge is done, I'm always looking for the next challenge. So first full marathon was the Marine Corps marathon. While training for that marathon is when I felt strange soreness in my ribs and my spine, which caused me to go to my general practitioner, and so he said nothing to worry about. I had just had a physical that January. So I completed a marathon, but it wasn't a time that I thought I could achieve, and the pain got worse. I went back to him and we got the diagnosis.
So Mr. Downs, when he came to us, was very sick. He had cancer in multiple areas of his body. He was extremely weak, stage 4 lung cancer, who is a never smoker. About 15 to 20% of patients who have lung cancer are never smokers. Lung cancer can be a difficult cancer for many reasons. First, it's a fairly aggressive cancer. Even small lung tumors can shed lung cancer cells that can go somewhere else and become metastasis. And so it isn't uncommon for patients with lung cancer to be diagnosed at a moment when their disease is already advanced at stage 4, when they have metastasis either in the brain causing difficulties in thinking or confusion, or in the bone causing pain.
So I actually didn't look at the PET scan. My wife saw it, and Dr. Gomez saw it, and he said it was so bad that we needed to do chemo right away.
And once he started on this targeted therapy, all of his symptoms really went away fairly quickly. He was able to come from being extremely sick to coming back to a fairly normal life very, very quickly, within a couple of months. These kinds of benefits that we can give patients with targeted therapies and newer investigational therapies are the main reason why I started doing oncology. This is an area where we can really help patients take their life back.
So the Marine Corps has this acronym that we use when we're in boot camp, and it's IAOs, Improvise, Adapt, Overcome. So that's my motto for everything in life.
Discipline, teamwork, hard work. Just a few of the many qualities that define members of our military. The same qualities translate into the field of medicine, which is why Mount Sinai has formed a special partnership with the Navy to help men and women in uniform attend medical school.
When I was planning my next steps after the military, I thought about the things I enjoyed most about the Marine Corps, which were a sense of service, helping others, being at that point of friction of making important decisions about life and death, and approaching those with humility and compassion. Those things that I thought really translated well into medicine.
The program that we've established with the Navy, and that we're going to expand to all of the branches of the armed forces, is an opportunity for servicemen and servicewomen who are finishing up active duty and seriously considering a career in medicine to be able to apply to medical school and avoid a lot of the typical traditional hurdles that, from our perspective, keep people away from potential careers in medicine.
Anytime we're in an academic institution involved with the military, it makes me happy, because I think that the young people in the military are just some of the most altruistic people I've been exposed to. It just reminds me of, a lot of the nurses I worked with in Afghanistan. They were so dedicated to taking care of the soldiers and sailors that were getting injured there, that. I think if they were offered to go home early, they wouldn't have gone home early because they wanted to make sure they did everything they could to help them and finish their time.
The kinds of attributes we look for in medicine in anyone, and that I think we all intuitively understand would make a great doctor, are things that include maturity, discipline, integrity, and an intensity of passion around this for the right reasons, which is making the world a better place and doing right by people, doing right by communities.
From Mount Sinai, you try to draw on all the amazing, world-class specialists you get to work with, and take that knowledge and meld it essentially with, the ability to work in more austere conditions.
Guy who went to Princeton a few years behind me, who's hit an IED in Afghanistan. He's paralyzed from the chest down. Like, I visited him in the hospital, and I was like, this is why I want to be a doctor, is to be able to help not only veterans. I'm definitely committed to helping veterans, but people who are having their worst day. I think veterans in medicine can be the best advocates for those patients.
When I was interviewing at Mount Sinai, somebody asked me, how are you going to change the world? And I thought it was a really big, really scary question. It's easy to think, oh, I'm just a medical student. I'm not going to do anything yet. When I'm a doctor, I'll help people, but right now I'm just studying.
I am making a difference, even as a medical student here at Sinai, to be able to serve the community that we're part of.
Wanting to be a doctor is rooted in wanting to create opportunities for other people, and health is part of that toolkit.
We come from completely different backgrounds. People have very different experiences, totally different passions. And so I don't think there is a typical medical student here. And I think that's a real strength.
There's kind of a conventional wisdom about what it takes to make it into the medical profession. And these 4 students, they break that mold in terms of their culture, their heritage, their backgrounds, their beliefs, and they can achieve incredible things because of the diversity that they bring, the diversity of experience, the diversity of thought that they bring to the profession of medicine. They are the future of healthcare in this country.
The medical students at Mount Sinai are passionate, they're dedicated, they are innovative, and they want to change the world, but they have different ways in doing it.
I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. It's always a little trite to start with where you started, but that is where I started. My mom was a dance teacher, and my dad is a family practice doctor, so I'm sort of doing the unexpected version of what you would expect. I danced in New York for about a decade, but I always knew in my heart that I would be a good doctor. I do think ultimately I'll be a very good doctor. I've always felt like I've been a good listener. People are willing to tell me things they might not tell other people. Perhaps that comes from being a gay guy and living a little bit on the outside of things and seeing other people's relationships. Maybe it comes from being a dancer and not thinking with words all the time and hearing body language. I have a deep understanding of the body that I don't think most people in medicine have because of my experience inspecting my own body and using it as an artistic tool. I hope that we're all changing medicine by the moment we maintain eye contact, by having a real conversation with people. Sinai selects students who want to understand the difficulties of other people and want to address those difficulties. They want people who have alternative backgrounds. I think they wanted me for those reasons.
When I see patients, it always reminds me of my parents and how important it is to me to make sure that they have doctors who understand them.
Terminé la primera semana de medicina.
Qué bueno.
I'm originally from Nicaragua, and I think like a lot of immigrants, my sister and I would end up having to navigate different systems for our parents. We'd have to advocate for them. One of the things I really liked about Mount Sinai is they say we train physician advocates. Being a doctor, it's always had to be more than just the stethoscope. Patients only spend like a fraction of their lives in front of me in clinic. So if I'm not doing anything to make sure that they have access to food at home and can even come to the doctor, then I'm not doing enough. I'm a third-year student at Mount Sinai. I'm part of the Primary Care Scholars Program, which means I get special teaching in how to provide primary care services to underserved communities. And one of the things that motivates me to be in medical school is to be that person and to help advocate for them, and maybe not to speak for them, but to amplify their voice. What wakes me up every day and gets me to show up is to remember that I need to give back to the people that got me to where I am.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear.
My story is that I come from a family of very passionate, but not necessarily financially well-supported family, who have instilled in me this sense of curiosity and dedication to the community. All my family, including my parents, have grown up in the rural countryside in South Korea. They didn't grow up with electricity. There were no phones. They had to cross rivers to attend their elementary school. My parents wanted to provide that same sense of expanded opportunity to my brother and me. I wanted to come to Sinai to conduct cutting-edge research and provide the clinical care to the less fortunate population. This is the path I wanted to take. For my PhD thesis, I'm developing software that synthesizes information from biomedical imaging such as CT scans and the radiology reports to flag high-risk patients that should be looked at by the radiologist first. We can make the physician's job so much easier by making sure that we're seeing the right patients at the right time, rather than having to go through thousands of images and case reports and charts. Currently, there exists a discrepancy in healthcare. My research will provide software algorithms that does not depend on very expensive computing power, that can be run on a smartphone. And what I'm hoping to do with developing a software that is readily deployable to everywhere, whether it's me in New York or my relatives in the rural hometown of Bonghua, is leveling the playing field. The important thing about having this level playing field is that we're saving lives no matter where we are in the world.
My spirit of wanting to give back is all tied into being Nigerian American. And I remember when I was young, one of the first memories I have of Nigeria, I think I was, maybe 10 or 11, and we went back to Upor, the village that my father's from. And I just remember seeing people without shoes. And I was just like, this is crazy, this isn't fair. That really sort of set me on the path for taking advantage of opportunities that better not only myself, but for people that don't have those opportunities. You want to change the landscape. The field that I'm interested in, spine surgery, is because there are so few women of color spine surgeons. Sinai truly helped me work out a way of being a surgeon, but then also wanting to be a doctor that serves communities of color. I felt that if I was going to really serve in an underserved community, that I needed to be a primary care physician on the front lines. And that knowing that you can do it all is something that I wouldn't be able to have come to that conclusion without talking it through with my mentors and the support system that I've made here at Sinai. It's so surreal when I'm scrubbing in, putting on my gloves, the lights are on me. I just never would have thought that I would be here. I think I would like the board of directors and everyone watching this to know that, as much as I chose Sinai, Sinai chose me. Who I am has really been nurtured by this place, and it's a relationship that I'm really thankful that I'm a part of.
One alum from the Icahn School of Medicine has had a special connection to Mount Sinai since birth. Her experience volunteering at the hospital as a teenager led to a successful career in science and medicine. It was a dream come true.
When we celebrate the 50 years of the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, we're celebrating a commitment to innovation, to diversity, to understanding diseases that we had no concept of 50 years ago, and to serving our community. And I'm really fortunate to be here to celebrate. I'm Talia Swartz, Assistant Professor of Medicine in the Division of Infectious Diseases. I'm a Mount Sinai lifer. I was born at Mount Sinai, and I've been here since I was a high school student seeking an exposure to science in the laboratory. As a volunteer at Mount Sinai, I met a couple of MD PhD students who talked about their goal being physician scientists. And the idea was just fascinating to me, that you could be both a doctor and a scientist and both take care of patients and also innovate in ways where you could improve our capabilities to treat patients. They were so generous with their time and made me feel, after the time that I had spent in a lab, like I was a scientist, like they were. The camaraderie and collegiality that I experienced as a high school student is pervasive at Mount Sinai, and it's the reason that I came here to be a student, and it's the reason that I never left. The Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai's culture of collaboration, we're all educating each other all the time, and I love to be in this environment that is constantly striving to be better, to innovate, and where we stand only to gain from learning from each other. The beauty of being a scientist is that it is a never-ending journey, and I think I was a scientist at 15, and I'm a scientist at 40. The sky's the limit here. I was struck by that when I came, and it's only magnified since I've been here.
About 1.5 million Americans have IBD, irritable bowel disease. Ongoing inflammation in the digestive tract can cause some uncomfortable symptoms. From nutritionists to surgeons to mental health professionals, Mount Sinai's IBD Center offers patients a personalized treatment.
I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in April of 2016, back in the Middle East. 2017, I came over to do my master's in chemical engineering at Columbia. And unfortunately, when I first got here, I went through a flare-up.
I remember that was the first thing I really got from his story, that this is such a critical juncture in my life. How do I get better? How can I get back into the game again?
You know, with a custom treatment plan, I was able to, it's been over a year now, I've been in remission. So I've been able to, to go to school, not worry about getting sick.
I think it ended up turning around what could have been a pretty calamitous or even catastrophic year for him. And he's doing great.
I feel taken care of, at least that's what I can say. And able to, live a normal, healthy life.
In the world of IBD, this has been a center that has always innovated in the care of patients with Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis.
What's unique about this place is that it was really developed with the patient in mind. We realized that we needed everybody to come to the patient as opposed to the patient needing to be deployed to the surgeon or consult a nutritionist on the outside or consult a social worker or a psychologist or need to deal with a pharmacy outside of the health system, for example. So we decided to bring that all in-house.
So what makes the Sinai IBD Center so great is that it is really at the forefront of innovation. GRIT is a program called Gaining Resilience Through Transitions. Our program is very resilience-based, so the idea is that we can build people's resilience in the setting of IBD and allow them to really thrive in life even though they have this chronic condition.
The ability to use these tools with the patient, engage them, they can see for themselves that it's their disease and it's not one Crohn's disease, and that we are actually individualizing our sort of treatment strategies to them and their disease and making it very personal.
There's an enormous legacy to carry on here, and this continues to the present where we continue to innovate and look for new treatments and really understanding why people get these diseases so that people in the future don't have to suffer with them.
Many parts of the world do not have access to surgical care, especially for people who need it. The Kirabira Surgical Center in Uganda offers surgical treatment to people in need. Its mission to improve global health. Take a journey with us now to Uganda.
The world today views surgery as exceedingly complicated and exceedingly expensive. And these fears drive many people away from considering the development of surgical services in underserved parts of the world. The belief that we'll never get the resources together to do this. How can we provide the same level of care in New York as we can provide in a rural village in Uganda? Our belief is that we can accomplish this in an economic way and in a high quality way. I think we're doing a very special thing here with this project in Chibira Village because it'll represent a model, an example for what might be done around the world to take a bite out of a very major problem, and that is the absence of surgical services to the majority of the world's population.
Mike was really focused on how do you build basically a surgical system for a setting like Uganda, which doesn't have surgical services. But he immediately realized that you actually had to redesign what surgery meant.
Our approach begins with the recognition that all surgery, particularly very complicated surgery, may be out of the reach of some regions. And if one accepts this as a limitation, beginning of a project like this, you can concentrate your efforts on the lion's share of surgical needs, which may represent anywhere between 65 and 70% of all surgical needs in these regions. They can't get an appendix removed. They can't get a hernia repaired.
The reality is that it's built in the middle of nowhere. We get maybe about 30% of regular grid power, and we probably get about maybe 30% of regular water supply through the local town tap. And those two factors itself forces us to come up with a unique way of designing to make the building self-sustaining.
We looked at the banana leaves, and it was wonderful to think about how they were both collecting sunlight and also providing shade. We realized that up until now, most solar panels have just been used to collect light, but they're also creating shade, and there was kind of a moment of, wait, we can do both.
We wanted to keep it to the minimum as possible and use the maximum local resources that are available.
I think the techniques that we use to build the building are ones that have, shall we say, stood the test of time. The use of manual labour, we've almost lost the art of that. And so seeing guys manoeuvring dirty great water tanks around by hand, using planks, sliding things down, it's stuff that wouldn't occur to us. If we take everything back to basics, it works. And I think this project has proved that.
It's not just about coming in there, throwing together some cement and bricks and creating a facility. It's about engaging the community and making them a participant in this development. The ability to have a Ugandan surgeon on site with the patient and a New York surgeon at a console here in New York operating at the same time because of this internet connectivity represents something that will make a quantum change in what can be offered in a facility of this nature.
The project is just the first of its kind. If this is successful, it could be a model of what could happen in many other places.
It's a very, very powerful example of how, with tremendous focus, a little bit of philanthropy and capital, to show that that can be done in a very effective way.
All of us are looking for people to look up to and say, how can we improve things? And someone just needs to take a leap and take a step forward and say, this is how it gets done.
What's attractive about this project is we think we can do a tremendous amount of good for a relatively small amount of money.
The possibilities are endless. There's nurses that need jobs and doctors that want to learn, and they want to learn from us, and we want to learn from them. It's a real partnership.
It's very exciting, and I'm really looking forward for it. I can't wait for it to start. It's going to change the way surgery is being done in Africa.
It may sound a bit melodramatic, the idea that everyone has a right to health care, but if everyone stood back and thought for a moment, it makes very good sense. It should be something as open to everyone as the ability to breathe air, ability to drink water. The thing that gets people going is the ability that they can participate in a meaningful way in changing the course of surgical care, first in a small little village in Kibera, Uganda, and next maybe in hundreds and hundreds of other regions around the world.
Thank you for watching our last episode of Mount Sinai Future You, which was recently nominated for 2 New York Emmy Awards in health categories. We've greatly enjoyed this partnership with CUNY TV to bring you stories about resilience and innovation and research. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for updates on new and exciting stories in science and medicine.